Okay. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. My name is Deborah Brown, and I'm the Executive Director of Good Business Colorado. And we're really excited to be presenting this event today. It's the third part of our series. And I'm going to pull up my notes that it won't let me do on that computer. Well, we're recording. That's what we have not started recording at this point yet before. So thank you for your patience. So for those of you who are not familiar with GBC, we're a grassroots organization for values-driven businesses that are working to build a more prosperous, equitable, and sustainable Colorado. And, we work with the most incredible businesses across the state, many of whom are with us here today. So thank you. Shout out to all our GBC members on today. We do a lot of educational programming that is aimed at helping businesses be better, whatever that means for them. And so we're really excited to present this, your employees' financial wellness, what you can do besides give a raise. This is the third part of our series. And I'd also like to thank our sponsoring organizations. We have the African Chamber of Commerce, the Alliance Center, the Colorado Black Chamber of Commerce, the Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Colorado, Inc., Entrepreneurship for All, the Latino Chamber of Commerce of Pueblo, the Longmont Sustainable Business Program, the Pueblo West Chamber of Commerce, the Rocky Mountain Microfinance Institute, Small Business Majority, Spur Leadership Coaching, today's workshop presenter, the Urban Leadership Foundation of Colorado, and Work-Life Partnership. Thank you so much to all of our sponsors for making this event possible. This is as I mentioned, the third part in our series, but you can view all of the prior workshops on the GBC YouTube channel. As we conclude today's workshop, I'll be sending out a link to a short evaluation form, and we'll also be sending an email that has a link to all of the recordings from the previous workshop. So keep an eye out for that. Your feedback's really helpful, especially as we start planning our 2022 programming to have information on what type of programming would be valuable to you in helping your business be better in whatever that means to you. So without further ado, I'd love to kick it over to Dan. He's our presenter today. Dan Cascabar's mission is to spur employee and employers to offer each other more good work. He founded Spur LLC to help organizations in Colorado build trusting teams, develop mid-level supervisors into leader coaches, and shape cultures that prioritize people. Dan especially delights in helping small businesses with frontline workers earning less than $30 per hour. He's developed people and people systems for 20 plus years, spanning talent acquisition, employee engagement, leadership development, program evaluation, process improvement, and pastoral care. He's a senior professional of human resources, and he serves on the Colorado Workforce Development Coalition. And without further ado, with the Workforce Development Council Sector Steering Committee, and he's a board member of Active Work, Inc. He lives in Denver and takes every opportunity to get in a good hike with his wife and 3 sons. So without further ado, I'll kick it over to you, Dan.
Thank you, Deborah. And it's my pleasure to be here again. I just love the diverse coalition of businesses and people that you've been able to unite together with Good Business Colorado. And it's my joy to be with you today. We've got a lot of content again. So I'm just going to jump right into it. You should be able to see my screen now. Please let me know if you can't. But yeah, we all have the opportunity to spur one another on toward good work. And that's especially true, I think, for frontline and essential workers. And so really the hope is that our employees are going to become more engaged, have a greater sense of dignity and purpose, and improve their performance to create tremendous value. And so that's what these presentations have been about. That's what this workshop series is about. And so we're going to dive right in. We previously had this Being an Awesome Boss was our first one. and that was strategies and resources for people-centered management. The second one in this series of improving employee retention and well-being is healthcare for any budget, tools to maximize the value of your health benefits. And then today, it's your employees' financial wellness. What can you do besides give a raise? And we know that we're in the midst of a great resignation right now. And my personal sense is that a great boss is probably the best benefit any employer can offer. And it's so important to also consider so many changes in innovations in specific benefits programs and ways of compensating employees. And that has to do with both healthcare and with a lot of financial products and solutions that are out there right now. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And so if we, just move to the next slide. There we go. I want to, in the next hour, talk about how we're going to frame the current financial wellness challenge. That'll be the first part. And then the second part will be just providing resources and tools. It's going to be structured very similarly to our healthcare presentation. And I wanted to go through the specific types of resources that we talk about when we talk about financial wellness. So the first resources are really about navigating and planning. Navigating and planning is really the container for everything else that's here. If you don't have a trusted person to speak with, it's very difficult to move forward in a lot of these areas. And financial coaching really does work. I'm a huge fan of it. Not only planning, which relies on a foundation of financial literacy, but also just coming alongside people, asking the right questions, listening intently, building the foundation of financial literacy, and then providing those tools. And so it's really helping with more of a focus on how than just like what's out there. And that's what navigators do really, really well. And it's about making it one step at a time. And so that's what I want to focus on first, because that's the basis for everything else. The second part, we'll be talking about financial wellness in terms of surviving now. And what I mean by that is, we need to see our employees cash flow positive and saving money. And that's actually less common than you might think. So many employees are living paycheck to paycheck. I think we've heard, many of us, these statistics, and it has to do with really these four areas, which budgeting is kind of encompassed in all of these. But what are we earning? How are we stabilizing and budgeting? Basic banking and savings, and then good borrowing. And then the next part is really after you get to that area of survival, where are we gaining margin and moving up? So talking about owning assets, building wealth, investing in the future, both in terms of us and our children, and then giving back to our communities, giving back to our children, and really leaving a legacy. So the way I like to talk about this is actually showing this graphic, and it's a little bit overwhelming, but what we need to think about is it's sort of like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Safety, survival, and security are at the bottom level. And there are very many people who are financially insecure. And so as you work at that lower level, it's really about, you see those questions off to the right. What do you need right now? There are many people in our community and many of our employees who may be in need from a safety and survival perspective. Next, we'll talk about just getting to positive cash flow and really addressing those financial insecurities. And you can see within each of these categories, I've put forth both products and resources that are available, the types of products and resources that really are most beneficial in each of these 7 levels of financial wellness. And then above that, we get to basic banking and savings, which is really what you need to get established. Think checking and savings accounts, debit cards, having trustworthy financial institutions that you can literally bank on. And then safety and survival through good borrowing. So many of us have challenges with credit and debt. And so really in asking the question, what do you want right now? Of course, we're looking at, potentially student loans that, total in the tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. In order to get above water, that needs to be addressed. And there's so many different forms of credit and debt that many of our employees are in. So that needs to be addressed. And then finally, we start to get above water and we talk about gaining margin. So the first one is owning assets and building wealth. And what can be improved right now? What really are your more medium-term goals is you can actually take a breath and you're just, you're no longer going from short-term to short-term. And then you can start to plan for your future and invest in your future with things like retirement accounts and college funds. And then gaining margin by giving back. Like I said, giving back to the community, giving back to your loved ones, and really leaving that legacy behind. And that's, I think, the goal for all of us. There's tremendous dignity in that. And yet so many of us feel that that is so far away. And so there's a lot of ways that we can address this as employers. Most of the products and services that we talk about as employer benefits and total comp tend to be those above the waterline types of products and services and resources. But there are so many more products, resources available below the surface. And that's a lot of what we'll talk about. But first, just a few caveats. We're primarily talking about dollars and cents right now, rather than specifics of total comp like childcare and healthcare. Those things are obviously critical. I did get into healthcare already last time. It was recorded, so we'll send out that link afterward. And of course, they're all interrelated, and I'm not naive to that. It's just a matter of what we can focus on during our time today. There are so many different ways that employers can have an impact on employee budgets, either by paying higher wages and more cash benefits or covering expenses. And that actually, I think, is a very good way to do it, covering things below the top line of an employee's income statement, so to speak, so that we can actually address things without raising wages. Secondly, financial wellness is very complicated and you cannot control the complexity, but advisors are your friends. There are many people here to help. I said that in the healthcare one. It's true about finances as well. I'm not a broker. I'm not earning commissions, but I have had conversations with lots of brokers to understand many of these options. And if you see your broker, offering the standard options right now, they're probably being lazy because there's so much innovation in the financial wellness space, just like the healthcare space. So ask your brokers for a variety of options. Also last session, we talked about how that healthcare, because of the complexity, it brings anxiety, but bringing clarity reduces that anxiety. And the same thing is true about finances, right? Your anxiety mirrors that of your employees in this regard. And many employees just don't understand how to get financially stable, and they're full on stressed out by the cost of living. And so really, this isn't going to be a comprehensive list, but there's going to be a lot of different things that I talk about. And much of this that I'm talking about applies nearly universally to people making less than $60,000 a year, but it also applies to many people that are making more. This is really intended to whet your appetite and get you thinking creatively about what your employees really need. So to simplify things, really, this is a key learning for me as I've looked into this topic, that compensation has been disconnected from our well-being. And I'll unravel this idea throughout the presentation, but in a sense, there's really, this is the bad news. The bad news is that there's two simultaneous upward pressures on wages, right? First of all, as employers, we have a labor shortage. And second of all, there's inflation and cost of living increases, especially for housing. And when we see competitors raising wages, our knee-jerk reaction is to match it, especially when employees complain about it. Wages and salaries increased 1.5% in the third quarter. It's the highest jump that the government has ever tracked since they started keeping track of this in the year 2000. And inflation is up 5.4% in the last 12 months. That's the CPR, far higher than at any time in the last 30 years, right? So this is a big deal. But here's where I want to go. The good news is that financial wellness isn't just about wages. And it's partially because of this compensation becoming disconnected from well-being. And again, like I said, we'll get to that in a bit. But showing that you care about your employees' finances with a holistic approach saves you money and actually gets you more engaged employees because they're seeing that you really care. This is a belief of mine that's built on experiences with a wide variety of companies that are taking innovation approaches to this topic. And for those of us who use HR speak, we know that wages are hygiene factors, which means that there's a minimum number that you have to reach in order for even the conversation to begin. There's a certain number that's required to get someone's attention to become an employee, but raises are short-lived. People get used to them very quickly, and there's a law of diminishing returns with wage increases. And in fact, psychologist Daniel Kahneman and economist Angus Deaton famously demonstrated that there's no benefit at all to emotional well-being after a certain income level. So I think that's really, really important for us to understand and acknowledge. More than anything, though, employees, that should say want to feel, not what to feel, want to feel like their financial world is stable in a world that is not. It's about outcomes, food on the table, rent in, healthcare, childcare, housing, mental wellness, and feeling like we're progressing in life, right? And so what we want to do is really approach total compensation from an employee value perspective for the purpose of employee recruiting, hiring, and retention, right? Employees want to know that you really do care. They are obsessed with that wage and salary number. We all can tend to be that way. It's easy because it's a real number. Even though other forms of compensation can have an enormous impact on finances, way more than the next $2,000 or $5,000 even that your salary might be. And I think employers forget that they can be a trusted resource in this case. They want their employees, but I think employees want employers to know kind of where they're going financially and what their goals are. And this can be an open conversation. There are pitfalls, and I'll address those too. But even during negotiation, that's a first opportunity to educate actually on how a lower salary with better benefits can result in far more household resources, both in the short term and the long term. And it's incumbent on you as the employer to make that argument and help that employee recognize that that is the better way to go. And so really it's about the first part that employees want is the self-efficacy, knowing how to get it right and the right people to ask. And as an employer, you can partially play the role of navigator and planner with them because you have a vested interest. The second thing is employees really care about their total household resources being greater than their spending. This is so obvious, right? We all want to be cash flow positive. We all want to know that we're bringing in enough to stabilize our lives. Shockingly, though, many of us don't even know how much it would really take. And we've all heard the statistic that 40% of Americans can't afford a $400 out-of-pocket expense without asking friends or putting it on credit. So this is a safety and security issue. It's become better since the unemployment benefits and the FFCRA and the ARPA legislation went through, but it's still a huge problem. Americans do not have savings. And so we need to really stop talking about what a living wage is and really start talking about what living total household resources are, which include benefits that are far beyond a wage. And this is especially difficult for folks, like I said, who are making, somewhere under $30 to $35 an hour. It's really important for us as employers to cooperate with government programs. And I don't think it's shameful for employers to have employees on Medicaid or have them shop on the exchange. I think it's absolutely a great solution for many, and it can be very helpful for the government to provide the support where they want to, and for us as employers to cooperate with that. 90% of Americans want emergency savings as an employer benefit. That statistic came from the AARP in April of 2021. And really what we're doing is we're just trying to address the challenge of making ends meet, especially in cities like Denver, where housing inflation and other cost of living expenses have skyrocketed. And this challenge doesn't just end with people making less than $60,000 a year. It carries over to a surprising number of folks making six figures. PayPal's senior vice president and chief corporate affairs officer, discovered this after doing an internal survey that many of his employees were living paycheck to paycheck. About a third of his employees averaged a net disposable income of only around 4 to 6%. And this is a company whose mission is to democratize finance. And many of them are receiving excellent paying paychecks in tech jobs. And so this is crucial for us to understand as employers. And really what employees want to do is they want to enable their future, right? The way we want to enable our future. And that's really what this third piece is, the gaining margin and moving up. So this is where we're going and what we're going to talk about. So employees are looking for personalized solutions that work in their world. And so this is really where I want to spend the bulk of our time today on is tools and resources. There are resources, right, to help employees take ownership of their finances and provide access to what they want for their future. It gives them hope. There are emotional and psychological components to this. And there's resources and help for these financial questions, both to make ends meet now and for planning in the future. I liken it to, and this might sound a little weird, but employers don't like to talk about money with their employees, just like parents don't like to talk about sex with their kids. In both cases, it's a requirement for the relationship to exist in the first place, but it feels awkward. We're not sure if we have the right things to say, but yeah, it's really, really important. And knowledge is power. It's not this zero-sum game where if you give your employees more information, that they're going to use that against you. It's done in the context of care and support, and they will be grateful. Am I still sharing my screen, Deborah? Okay, great. Things switched up a little bit on me on my screen, so I just want to make sure.
Yeah, and you do have a question. I don't know if you want it now or later.
Would love to hear more about what an emergency savings benefit and how it works. Robin, that's great. We're getting to it. Yeah, let's keep going and we'll get to that. So the first thing that I want to talk about when we talk about self-efficacy, right? We're talking about the self-efficacy survival now first, and then we'll get to what it looks like to really gain margin. Okay, so the navigation and planning piece is really the first part. And like I said, the employer can be that navigation and planning resource during the orientation itself. The orientation is really probably the second opportunity after the negotiation to take a relational rather than a transactional approach to your employees. And the biggest thing you can do is even issue FYIs about resources that are available. And I'll get into those resources in a little bit, but you as employers are experts of your own benefits program, why you chose the financial benefits you did to empower your employees. And there's a ton of leeway to design the orientation in a way that provokes conversations, questions, and engagement. The HR department is great, but it can often be distrusted. I've often seen that hiring managers are the ones that are most trusted with this information. So it can be helpful for an employer to empower hiring managers to have these types of conversations. And it could just simply be a statement like, to the extent that you'd like to know more about what we offer and why we offer it and how it could benefit you, I'm here to help you. I really am. And if you treat it as an opportunity to understand your employees and their needs, you could learn a lot. And the concern I hear about this is, I don't want to know too much. Obviously, speak to your legal and HR advisors about this, but that concern is largely overblown. I've spoken many times with the Employers Council and other resources on this subject, and I've done a lot of coaching. And as long as you're having this conversation on the employee's terms, it's okay to have. And if it really truly is a concern that you're not willing to, move to the other side of, there are third-party coaches and navigators, and I'll get to that. And if you do hear something such as your employee having a disability that they previously didn't disclose, that you weren't already privy to, you have to make a note of that and put it in our HR file. I think that's really important to note. But in general, these conversations go really well. I think they go much better than employers think they're going to go. And the liability is actually relatively small compared to the huge upside of having these conversations. And next, there's plenty of free financial coaching available. Tax Help Colorado gives free tax return coaching and navigation for folks earning up to $57,000 a year. That's through the VITA program. I'll talk a little bit more about that. In Denver, there's the Financial Empowerment Centers, which offer free navigators. And Enrich also provides the same type of service through the Colorado Workforce Development Council through the entire state. And so there's so many options here. And of course, there's also so much self-education out there that's also free. Some of it's paid as well, but you've got Coursera, Khan Academy, so many options. And then you've got paid coaching and navigators. These are the third-party ones I've talked about. Prosper Bridge is one that's here locally, as is Work-Life Partnership. I know Work-Life Partnership has many more services than simply financial coaching, but it's a really good option. And so these are some of the resources that you have available. And then finally, after you share these resources about navigation, again, it comes back to you as the employer being part of that navigation and planning process by saying what's working in terms of our benefits program, asking for needs assessments, sending out surveys so you know what benefits are most beneficial for your employees. And so let's move quickly through some of these. So free tax prep through Colorado VITA, Tax Help Colorado, and the Denver Asset Building Coalition. Colorado VITA actually has a resource where you can go to their website and search based on zip code and find the nearest center to your workplace or potentially to your employee's home. I mean, it's very simple to use. It isn't super a super wonderful user interface, but it's available. So that's where these kinds of services, it's so important to just let your employees know. They'll go, oh, thank you. I never knew about this. And because they never knew about this and you as the employer is the one telling them about it, it can be tremendously, tremendously helpful. It's also critical for accessing tax credits. The earned income tax credit, over 30% of those who qualify in our state do not file for it. And it is a tremendously beneficial program for folks with lower incomes. Of course, child credits, we're all seeing those come through now on a monthly basis. If your folks are not filing their taxes, they're not getting that credit. And there's other tax credits available as well. Tax Help Colorado is now run by the Mile High United Way. It's supported by Gary Community Investments, very solid. These are programs that are in part run by the IRS to help people understand and have resources for filing their taxes. Next, in terms of pure coaching, Bank on Denver and the Financial Empowerment Centers in Denver County, they have free financial coaching. They have interpreters available in many different languages, also sign language, if you have advance notice and schedule that. So they also have this federal program called the Personal Access to Capital Grant Application for folks that are earning less than $75,000. The priority is for single parents of children under 18, but if they've had a specific hardship during COVID, they can apply for a grant to cover expenses. And this is something that many, many folks just have no idea about. And again, quickly, Enrich, this is not a very pretty slide, but this is just what Enrich's website looks like. They also have self-education, a lot of self-education tools and resources, plus one-on-one coaching throughout the entire state. And you can just look them up at cwdc.enrich.org. It's a very simple website to navigate to and get connected with a certified personal finance expert. Next, I want to talk about Prosper Bridge. It's a nonprofit here in town, and its executive director is Jervis DeChico. He's a friend, and he's a former financial advisor and investment professional for high net worth clients. And he will share that he personally went through a financial crisis that put him in a surprisingly humble financial position after being very comfortable. And it was an aha moment for him. And he realized that people were trapped in perpetual cycles of scarcity and debt, and that financial products are often more costly than people think. Only 8% of Americans actually use a financial plan, and only 8% of employees use their company's financial wellness plan. This is a problem. It's a problem of trust. It's a problem of literacy. It's a problem of understanding. And this is a resource which is third-party navigators as an employee benefit. They do a full intake. It's private. They go through 17 different domains related to finances, and they're connected to other resources that we'll share about later on, including those emergency savings accounts and income access lines of credit, savings incentive matching, low interest loans, things like that. The cost for this is, and I think what I didn't yet say is it's 30 minutes per month of financial navigation services per employee, one-on-one, dedicated. They're non-commissioned, they're not incentivized to sell products to you or your employees. And so it's just a matter of what's the next best thing for your employee. Again, a step at a time. The cost is $350 per person per year. And so that's, if we think about that in terms of what that looks like compared to a raise, it's a fraction of what health insurance costs or what many other parts of compensation would be. It's equivalent to the raise of 17 cents an hour for a full-time employee, right? It's 1% of minimum wage. The employer pays and the employee gets the benefit. And so this is a really important resource. I want to also now pivot from coaching and navigation and planning to now, okay, what are the attributes of how does an employee survive, right? So the first part of that is earnings. That's like, the bottom part of that hierarchy that I was sharing. And there's a wide variety of wages, and our employees are constantly telling us wages are too low, and we know that, and there's truth to that. I'm not saying that it's not true. It's often because of housing and childcare costs. We'll get into a little bit of the varieties of different cash compensation later, but I also just want to point out that the non-cash compensation has a huge impact on cash flow. Here's one quick example. If you raise wages and someone comes off Medicaid and then you offer a health care plan, they just became less financially stable for two reasons. First, they now have to pay out of pocket for health insurance premiums, which could likely be several $100s per month. And now they're also subject to having to pay significant deductibles, copays, and coinsurance for medical care and prescriptions that they weren't previously paying. This is a huge hit for people who are coming off of Medicaid. I can't emphasize it enough. And of course, the recommendation that I gave last time was there's huge subsidies on the Colorado Health Exchange for individual plans. And it's much better for you to send your employees there than offer your own ACA compliant health plan if you can have that option. The next thing I quickly want to talk about is even just access to pay, what's called earned wage access. Pay Active is a solution provider where they basically provide access to employees' wages the day that after they work. And Ernst & Young did a survey that approximately $1 trillion is left in accrued employer payroll accounts in the United States and 36 other developed countries, And millennials, especially, and Gen X employees really want to make payday more flexible. They don't want their paychecks even waiting 1 week or 2 weeks for sure, but definitely, even 1 week or 2 days. They want the money that they've earned now. 80% would prefer to have their pay automatically streamed into their bank accounts as they earn it. And 81% said that they'd take a job with an employer that provides access to earned wages on demand at no cost to them over an employer that does not. And I think what this is about is it's about a sense of fairness. If I've put in the hours, I should have the cash, period. 79% said it would make them feel more valued as an employee and increase their loyalty to an employer. So I think this we can't emphasize this. This is a very simple little thing with potentially a tremendous impact. And now I want to switch to earnings and talking about wages specifically. Here is just a little chart I created on the living wage here in Denver. And you can see based on the household type, it's all over the place, which is why another reason why I really don't like the conversation about living wage, because it's taking a very blunt instrument to something that we need to take a scalpel to based on what the household makeup is. And you as an employer can take a better scalpel than just offering a specific bottom line. And you can do this through non-cash compensation and other creative financial wellness other than just the wage. This data is from MIT. It's the living wage calculator. The Colorado Center for Law and Policy also has one. If you have a housing subsidy, it makes a huge difference to what you need. And you could qualify for a housing subsidy up to $65,000. I think this is really important because people think, government benefits programs are for folks who, are right around minimum wage. It's not true. There's government programs for many people earning more than that. And without knowing if your employees have government benefits, it's very difficult to know how to provide help. And so I think that's why the open conversation is a very good one. Moving on, we want to talk about stabilizing, and so many people who are not earning enough, not earning that living wage or above based on the combination of cash and non-cash compensation. They're finding all sorts of different ways, right, to try to solve that cash flow crisis is really what it is. And many of these solutions that are in front of you, for your employee end up costing significant energy and time to secure if your employee isn't at the living wage, right? And they cost a lot of money too. For example, the average payday loan is 391% annual interest, right? And so this is predatory, yes, but it's also like the only option they have. So if you can come up with any option that's better than that one, your employees are going to be thrilled. And so, other loans, for example, employees, I see it all the time that employees max out their debt to income ratios on the most expensive car they can get approved for just because they can, because there's not the education. And we're talking about 11 or 15% loans on a car. This is going to kill your financial future. And it happens so often. So a little bit of that navigation along the way is so important because, again, these other ways of stabilizing often do not work very well. Income protections are such an important part of stabilizing. There's a new sick leave law in Colorado. It's gone into effect for employers with 16 employees or more already this year, and it will go into effect for every single employer on January 1st. And that's every employer is required to provide 1 hour of sick leave for every 30 hours worked, guaranteed, and toward a maximum of 48 hours per year. And then we also have the Family Act that came through in Colorado, which is 12 weeks of leave and an option for 4 more weeks for mothers with complications. Those payroll contributions start for employers in 2023, and the program begins being implemented in 2024. It's not just for new moms and dads, it's for surgery recovery, chemo, dialysis, care for family members, safe leave for victims of domestic violence and other crimes. And the lowest wage workers making less than $590 a week, which is tied to inflation over time, will receive 90% of their wages through this program back. So this is important for you to know as employers. There are these programs coming up that might change the way that you think about how to provide the right resources, tools, and products for your employees. As far as the insurances go, we talked about this a lot last time with the healthcare, short-term disability, long-term disability, life insurance. These things are just critical income protections, especially for people who are on the margins, and they cost pennies on the dollar. Compared to other benefits that you might offer, and the impact for your employees, while the risk is low, the impact when it does happen is absolutely huge. And that's where I want to move on to this graph. I've showed this the last 2 times too, but breaking even is really harder than you may think. Tax credits are so important for those that are eligible for them. Because of a variety of reasons, but it's because these graphs show with tax credits included, including the earned income tax credits, the child tax credits, and the child care and dependent care tax credits. Even still, if you look at this single parent with 2 kids and no housing allowance, they're really not even breaking even, right? Until they hit $44,000 a year. That's including the earned income tax credit, which could be something like $8,000 to $10,000 and only happens in March after the fact. So you're looking at your employees in this scenario potentially having a deficit of $750, $900, even $1,000 a month, all the way up to $44,000 if they don't have housing assistance. That's a really sobering thought, right? And so there's a long way to go. And I think that's where I think this is so important for employers to understand. This is how compensation has gotten disconnected from well-being. Even if you give a wage, look at how flat these curves are for earnings between $20,000 and all the way up to almost $60,000. And if you're not claiming the earned income tax credit, you're still not breaking even. You're still not breaking even at $60,000, regardless of whether or not you have housing assistance. I think that's really important for us as employers to understand. There's so much more to this, and I could talk about this for a long time, but I need to continue. So without further ado, I want to get into basic banking and savings, answering this question that was up. Good borrowing. Judah Music is here, and he is the executive director of the Community Impact Fund. And I'll talk about that one and the Sunny Day Fund, or Judah will, because many of these income protection, I'm sorry, I was reading the wrong notes here, but Judah is the executive director. The Community Impact Fund is a wonderful new nonprofit resource in our community. And so Judah, without further ado, I just want to kick it over to you.
Thanks, Dan. Is there any way I could share my screen, or is that too much?
I think you can.
Let's see. Don't want to rock the boat here, but so my name is, actually, was that the right one? Are you seeing this website here, Dan?
Yep.
Okay. So, hey, everybody, my name is Judah Music. I live down in Castle Pines. I'm the executive director of the Community Impact Fund. Like Dan said, we are 501c3. I'm a tech entrepreneur, so I've been building software platforms for about 20 years. And in 2017, when I stumbled across this problem, it really felt to me like a problem worth solving that was not at the time. So what that is financial scarcity, which Dan's been talking really well about. That shows up in every employer in every city in America. And I was shocked when I learned the data around Denver, Metro, Castle Pines, Douglas County. So that started for me with one search. It was a Google search, December of 2017. The first result was from a Forbes article that said Douglas County was the 4th highest income county in America, which is great, except for the second result, which was from Secor, which is a large food bank. I think they're the largest food bank in Metro Denver, that said we had 45,000 households living in suburban poverty defined by food insecurity. Those two stats do not reconcile, right? And so percentage-wise, that's 25% of households. That's 1 in 4. So my brain is saying, how in the world does 1 in 4 households in the 4th highest income county live to the point of food insecurity? It makes no sense. And when I went to talk to Dennis Gordon, the executive director of Secor, he showed me the wellness report from the county that proved it. And he educated me on this issue called ALICE. I don't know if anyone's heard this. It's a United Way acronym, and it stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, but Employed. I'm going to just share 2 resources, and I can drop this into the chat after. Our website that talks a lot about this, and this website from the United Way, where you can go to any state in the country. The darker the blue, the higher the ALICE. And what this shows us is really clearly the percentage of families that are living above the federal poverty line, which gets a lot of attention from social service nonprofits, government benefits. And then the rest of these households that are not even breaking even, like Dan was just talking about on the last slide, they have negative cash flow, they have no liquidity or no emergency savings, and they're on average spending 25% of their income just servicing high interest consumer debt. Okay, that is a terrible thing for any employer's P&L and balance sheet. And what this shows us is that, like in Colorado, we have 2.1 million households. 10% are living below the poverty line, which is probably not a surprise to many, but 30%, and by the way, this is 2018 census data, so this is before COVID, it's gotten much worse. 30% are ALICE. And we can click in on the state and then go down a little bit on the page and see at a county level how bad it is in your county or whoever you're talking to. And this is the irony. So Douglas County, where I started this, actually gets press online for having the lowest, I think, poverty rate, or the lowest child poverty rate in the nation. You can see right here, it's at 2%, which is great, right? except until you realize that 23%, and again, you combine that with the 2, and there's your 1 in 4, are living in this Alice demographic. Nobody knows that. That is not being discussed within employer groups. And so what do we do about it? Dan's talked a lot about this, and we've got more information. In fact, that Pay Active, the Earned Wage Access, we partner with them, and $173 billion a year goes to the banks in the form of fees, late fees and overdraft fees for your employees that are managing paychecks. And it's not about the amount of pay as much as it is the timing of pay, right? So how do we solve for that? So we've been working since 2017 to figure out the key components of solving for cash flow and emergency savings and then debt elimination so that we can solve this problem at a root level. And one of the really important things to understand is most of the philanthropic causes that employers are getting behind in the community, it's all great work, but most of them are connected directly to the household budget. And what I mean by that is when you think of affordable housing and food insecurity and transportation and healthcare issues, those are all line items in your employee's budget. And if you can help your employee break even on a month, like Dan was talking about, guess what? Those things diminish and eventually go away. And so our whole program is about helping employees find financial wellness through their benefits. The way we do that is quite simple. We've done a lot of research. We started out doing hardship grants. And so we'd set up a benevolence program for an employer. We would help them administer it, and we would administer grants for financial hardships. However, what we realized and what we know now a whole lot better is that grants are not the best way to modify or change someone's behavior. And what we're really looking for is an outcome around a savings behavior, a debt elimination behavior, and then getting into the 401k or the retirement products. And so handing out cash for needs is not the ultimate solution. There's a time and place for that. Think natural disasters, houses burning down, tragic events like a death in the family. That's the charitable case for grants, in our opinion. But what we do now mostly is what we call impact loans. How an impact loan works is the employer will establish a hardship fund. That is established as a dedicated fund specifically for the needs of that employee group only. That's a charitable contribution to the Community Impact Fund. We then turn around and we promote that as a benefit to those employees. They apply, it's anonymous. It's really important that you protect the dignity of these families. If you call them to your office or HR to fill out paperwork and talk about their financial problems, you're going to see very low participation because talking about money is one of the last things that your employees want to do. And then we will administer those funds as impact loans, which are interest-free loans, zero interest, zero fees, guaranteed. They have a flexible payback. So I was going to see if I had a better spot to describe it. They have a flexible payback to help bridge the cash flow problem that Dan talked about. And then the kicker is that 10% of every dollar paid back on that loan goes to an emergency savings incentive. Okay, so just like a retirement benefit that most of us have been working with for decades, those are the keys. It's easy to enroll, it's automated, and it's incentivized. And with those three things, you can modify your employees' behavior from just borrowing, consuming, and then missing payments because of this crunch and building savings and getting out of debt. So that loan actually becomes an incentive to save. And so you set the rules then on, what milestone they need to save an emergency fund, whether they need to go to debt counseling or budget counseling and all those things that Dan was talking about. And that pool of funds become available to those that are actually progressing through a savings behavior. So I know Dan only gave me about 6 minutes, so I'll stop there, but I can stick around, and Dan, you can definitely give my contact info.
Thank you, Judah. Appreciate that.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Judah, for that. Yeah, I really appreciate these comprehensive solutions like the one that Judah has developed with the Community Impact Fund. And I appreciate that these are local resources. These are the vast majority of these resources that I'm sharing are developed by Coloradans for Coloradans. And I think that's really important to note. Another one with a presence here in Colorado is the Sunny Day Fund. It's another savings product that provides incentives for matched savings. It's mobile friendly. They have what they call the Sunshine platform, which is a really friendly user interface that what they say it provides personalized nudges for people to help them save. And it's based on cognitive behavioral therapy. I mean, there's a lot of these types of tools that are using positive psychology to help our employees. And they also partner with programs for consolidating high interest debt, help with student loan debt, budgeting, all those sorts of things. So after we get all of that sort of settled in and the cash flow stuff is worked out and there's good borrowing instead of bad borrowing, then we can finally talk about gaining margin and moving up with long-term savings, investing, and giving, right? And so the first thing is health savings accounts and flexible spending accounts, HSAs and FSAs. And there is such a thing as a dependent care FSA, which allows for pre-tax deductions used for childcare expenses in order to be able to work. It works like an HSA. It has to be qualified expenses. They actually extended and expanded the amount available in 2021 because of COVID. It is typically a $5,000 maximum per employee, but they pushed it up to $10,500 in 2021. It accrues over time. It's the current account balance only, so you can't front load it. That's one difference between an HSA, and an FSA. And the employee is not eligible if they have a spouse that doesn't work, because basically the federal government says, well, that person could be the child care. But speak to a broker on these, but I just want you to know that they're available. If you're in Boulder or Broomfield, there's what's called the PI program. And what it is it's a 4-to-1 matched savings program. If your employee saves up to $1,000, they will get $4,000 more as long as they have become a part of this personal investment enterprise program, which matches that based on buying their first home, paying for post-secondary education, or starting a small business. So it's limited to those three things. This is run through the Mile High United Way, and they just grabbed it from the Flatirons United Way in order to potentially expand this throughout the state. So that's why I mention it. Rosemary Thompson is the woman who runs that program. There have been 379 graduates of that program right now. And so I think that's important to mention. Next one is home ownership, right? Affordable home ownership. Love Thy Neighbor, ltnhomes.org is run by Joe and Jessica Dominguez. It's a brokerage service for income qualified households seeking affordable home ownership. They work directly with Habitat for Humanity and Elevation Community Land Trust and the Colorado Housing Finance Authority. These are really innovative programs for helping low-income individuals purchase homes, particularly Elevation Community Land Trust, where basically it's a 99-year lease on the land while they own the home on that land, and that can shave off hundreds of thousands of dollars of the cost of the property. It's a really interesting model. Next, obviously, are the traditional retirement accounts, right? This is definitely so important. 401ks are the most common. Others do exist, like simple IRAs. GBC has certified financial planners and retirement planners in their network. For example, Laura from the Sustainable Advisors Alliance. So Deborah, I'm sure you could provide that information with the members here. And then Deborah, why don't you just share just a bit on the Colorado Secure Savings Program?
Yeah, sure. So this was a piece of legislation that worked its way through over a series of years. And essentially, it only applies for businesses that don't currently provide retirement benefit for their employees. So, and for businesses with 5 or more employees, likely, we're actually going to be heading in the rules and regulation making for this program. And so that's an opportunity for employers to provide input on what would be of service to their business and employees. But the idea is the state established retirement program takes on the fiduciary responsibility, and the only role of the employer is to be a relayer of information and set up the payroll deduction from the state program where the employee can choose their amount. It is opt out, so employees are automatically enrolled. That's important because that's where you see the greatest success. Most likely employees stay in the program if they're auto enrolled, but they do have the option to opt out or to change their contribution amount. And so it's an entry level product basically for people who don't have access to retirement benefits through an existing workplace plan. And it's coming online probably in the next 2 to 5 years after it goes through the rulemaking process.
Thank you, Deborah. And I did just post the information about Love Thy Neighbor in there as well. And moving on quickly, because I know we just have a few more minutes. Of course, College Invest, 529 accounts to help your employees invest in their children and in their college. There's an income tax credit available for employers right now who contribute to an employee's 529 tuition program. The credit, it's a tax credit, keep in mind, so it offsets, right, your 4.36 or 4.63% business income tax at 20% of the contribution. Capped at $500 per employee per tax year. And so I think that's a really important one to understand. And then finally, Made to Impact and their benevolence platform. I think this is a really neat one. And Judah was associated with putting this one together as well. It's through Red Rocks Credit Union. And here's just a quick example of their dashboard. And they're using this internally and they're rolling it out now to businesses all over. And basically what you can see here is that it's a dashboard where each employee has a one-stop shop to see, okay, I have an income access line of credit, meaning based on my future earnings, I have an income access line of credit up to $2,000 and I have that account right in front of me. I've got an emergency savings account. I've got a debt elimination loan. I've got a long-term savings account. And then I've got a giving account. And so it shows sort of the full spectrum of an employee's financial wellness and opportunities right there in one single dashboard. It's really, really neat. And they've brought this a long, long way. And so they're setting up a foundation for this work. It's a nonprofit. It's expected early next year. So keep this in mind because this is probably something you want to look into. They can design this platform in a white label way so that it's available for every single employer to brand as they want it. And it is a way for you to engage with your employees. Lastly, they have a benevolence platform that's associated with that, where you can actually see and promote contributions of fellow employees to contributing to each other for their needs. And this is something that they have seen just tremendously benefit employee engagement with each other, and it can be anonymous or not. And they match those as an employer. And so for dollar, they're not seeing anything as beneficial for them from an engagement standpoint for their employees. So with that, I'll just say this is the full spectrum, right? We've got a full spectrum of opportunities for your employees. So let's not just talk about the above water ones. Let's get a little bit more into the nitty gritties. And I'll just throw up my 5 takeaways because we're right at 1 o'clock now. So I want to be respectful of your time. But I think, maybe the most important thing to note is what makes you feel good and secure and in control of your financial well-being, and what has your own journey been? Remember that, and offer your benefits in kind. People are hurting financially, even people who are making 6 figures. We didn't get to things like skills development training. Guild Education is an amazing platform for training employees. And we're often scrambling because we feel like we're behind the 8 ball, but I want you to feel empowered to make good decisions for your employees. And I hope this was helpful for you to ask the question of what does your employee value? Don't be afraid to ask them. And then finally, one last thing, there is a toolkit out there, and we can post this in the chat here. This toolkit is really, really, it has a lot of these resources in it. And And here it is. I just posted it. You might have to get rid of that colon in there. Deborah, you can help me with that. But a lot of what I've shared is in here and all of the resources. So you can go right there. It's publicly available. This was put together through a grant with the Aspen Institute through their Family Prosperity Innovation Community. There's a group of us that are a part of that here in Colorado, and it's the best resource we could come up with. So really appreciate your time today. I'm sorry we didn't get time for questions, but hopefully that was helpful information. And Deborah, I'll kick it back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan. You see Dan's contact info. So if you have a question you didn't get answered, Dan, I don't want to say for you, but I'm sure you'd be happy to field questions.
For sure.
So feel free to contact Dan. I just posted our link to our evaluation form. If you could just take like 1 to 2 minutes to provide some feedback on today's event, as well as some ideas for what we should be doing in 2022 that would be useful, we would be so incredibly grateful for that. Thank you again, Dan, so much for your expertise. I also want to give one final shout out to our sponsoring organizations, the African Chamber of Commerce, the Alliance Center, the Colorado Black Chamber of Commerce, the Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Colorado, Inc., Entrepreneurship for All, Good Business Colorado, the Latino Chamber of Commerce of Pueblo, the Longmont Sustainable Business Program, the Pueblo West Chamber of Commerce, Rocky Mountain Microfinance Institute, Small Business Majority, Spur Leadership Coaching, the Urban Leadership Foundation of Colorado, and Work-Life Partnership. Thank you so much to those groups for making this possible. And we will be sending you an email with a link to all of our recordings. So sorry we kept you a couple extra minutes, but thank you so much for your time. And we look forward to seeing you for our programming in 2022.
Thank you all. Really appreciate it.